Aaron's daughter. So our next speaker, unlike my son, has actually gone and taken ideas and is already out there changing the world. He's not just thinking about it. Scientist, cancer researcher, inventor, and teenager, Jack Andraka has already taken several really important steps in his journey from idea to invention. Inventions that are life-saving. So Jack, would you come up here and tell us your story?
So I suppose my story really began when I was about 13 years old, when a close family friend who was like an uncle to me actually passed away from pancreatic cancer. And when the disease hit so close to home, I knew I needed to learn more. So I went online to find answers, and I found all these statistics on pancreatic cancer, but what I found really shocked me. You see, 85% of all of these cancers are diagnosed late, when someone has less than a 2% chance of survival. And as I dug deeper, I was wondering, why on earth are we so bad at detecting these cancers? And that's when I found an even more shocking statistic. Our current test is this 60-year-old test. I mean, first off, that's older than my dad. But also, it's grossly inaccurate, missing 30% of all cancers, and it's $800, and your doctor will rarely order it unless he's extremely suspicious that you have the cancer. So it doesn't work at all, and so armed with 8th grade biology, I set out to change how we did cancer diagnostics. Bit lofty of a goal, but I was going to try and do it. And my kind of rationale was the current test sucks so much that anything I do will probably be marginally better. So armed with this optimistic attitude, I then found what a center for pancreatic cancer would really have to look like in order to be effective. It would have to be inexpensive, rapid, simple, sensitive, selective, and minimally invasive. I was pretty sure I could do this. I kept doing more and more research, and that's when I found why we haven't updated our tests in over 6 decades. And that's because when we're looking for these cancers, we're looking at your bloodstream, particularly for these variations in protein levels. And while this sounds really straightforward, it's anything but, because you're looking at liters and liters of blood that's already been in thousands of different proteins, and you're looking for this tiny difference in this tiny amount of a single protein. It's next to impossible. It's like trying to find a needle in a stack of nearly identical needles. However, undeterred due to my teenage optimism, or as some people label it, complete and utter ignorance of the entire field of cancer research, I continued on, and I found a database of over 8,000 proteins I found in your bloodstream when you have these cancers. And it was my summer break. I had nothing else to do, so I just plowed through all 8,000 proteins, locked myself in my room, went through all of them. By the end of the summer, I was really doubting my potential for any future social interaction. I accidentally called my best friend calcitonin by the end of the summer. However, when I was close to losing my sanity on the 4,000th try, I found the one protein that could work. And the name of this protein is called mesothelin. And it's just your ordinary run-of-the-mill type protein, unless, of course, you have pancreatic, ovarian, or lung cancer, in which case it's found at these very high levels in your bloodstream. But also, the key is that it's found in the earliest stages of the disease, when someone has close to 100% chance of survival. So if you could detect this protein, you could detect the cancers when survival is at its best. But now the question was, how on earth am I going to detect this thing? And my answer came in the most unlikely of places, my high school biology class, the absolute stifler of innovation. Particularly with my biology teacher, we did not get along. She'd steal all of my articles, and I refused to do work in her class. So one day I rebelled how any self-respecting teenager would. I smuggled in an article on single-walled carbon nanotubes. In a single-walled carbon nanotube, there's these long, thin tubes of carbon. They're an atom thick, and they're 1/50,000th of the diameter of a single strand of your hair. So they're extremely small, but they have these amazing properties. They're kind of like the superheroes of material science. They're stronger than steel and can conduct electricity better than copper. So I smuggled this in, was reading about all these properties, and about the same time, we were learning about these things called antibodies. It's like a lock and key. It will only react to one specific protein, in this case, that cancer biomarker. And I was just sitting there when all of a sudden it hit me. You could combine these two concepts, and what you end up with is a network of these nanotubes laced with antibodies. And this creates a carbon substance that will only react to one specific protein due to those antibodies. But also, due to the amazing properties of these nanotubes, it actually changes how electricity flows through it based on the amount of protein present and thus indicate whether or not someone has pancreatic cancer. And you measure that using a $50 ohm meter you get from Home Depot and steal from your dad. And then I was thinking, well, these networks of nanotubes, they're very flimsy, and since they're so delicate, they need to be supported. So I chose to use paper, and making a paper sensor for pancreatic cancer is about as simple as making chocolate chip cookies, which I personally love. All you do is you take some water, you pour in the nanotubes, add some antibodies, mix it up, take some paper, dip it, dry it, and you can detect cancer. It's literally as simple as that. And but then I thought, well, I'm going to need a lab to do this research. I couldn't do cancer research on my kitchen countertop. Like, me and my brother had done some crazy things, like we cultured E. coli and cholera where we make our sandwiches, and we landed my poor mother on the FBI watch list due to our fiddling with explosives that left some craters in our backyard. But I couldn't really ask for cancer cells for Christmas, so I type up this manifesto, 30 pages long. I send it out to all these professors, and at Johns Hopkins, 200 professors sit back waiting for all these positive responses to pour in. I got 199 rejections. I realized professors aren't nearly as nice as those glowing profile pictures make them seem. But eventually I got one positive response. I go in, and I'm super excited. I come in my most professional attire of sweatpants and a hoodie, come from swim practice, so my hair's a hot mess, go in, and expect a normal interview, like, oh, what's your favorite color? What do you want to be when you grow up? No, this guy brought 28 PhDs plus himself into the room, and we probably set some Guinness Book of World Records for population density. It was this tiny room. So I go in, the interrogation starts. I was surprised I didn't have latches around my hands to latch me down to the chair. But finally, I stumble out after an hour-long interrogation. I had no clue what they were saying. I mean, my knowledge of cancer biology was a 6-month crash course that I'd given myself using Google and Wikipedia. So I guess C, just like I did on my SATs. Turned out pretty well. I got my lab space, and as soon as I started, I realized I sucked at cancer research. I'd screw up everything, I'd sneeze in my cells or blow them up in the centrifuge. It was awful. And my only lab experience was my downstairs basement lab, which was mistaken as a meth lab, and my high school lab. So finally, after 7 months of screwing up every imaginable scientific procedure, I ended up with one small paper sensor that costs 3 cents and takes 5 minutes to run. This makes it 168 times faster, over 26,000 times less expensive, and over 400 times more sensitive than our current methods of detection. But also can detect these cancers in the earliest stage, when something has close to 100% chance of survival. And so far, it has over 90% accuracy at detecting these cancers. So in the next 2 to 5 years, this patent-pending sensor could lift the once dismal pancreatic cancer survival rates from 5.5% to close to 100%, and do similar for ovarian and lung cancer. But it wouldn't stop there. You can simply switch out that antibody, as simple as switching out butterscotch chips for chocolate chips and cookies, and detect an entirely different disease. So you could detect things ranging from Alzheimer's, other forms of cancer, even HIV, AIDS, and heart disease. The possibilities are literally endless. And through this, I learned a lot of really important lessons. I mean, I learned all of this new stuff, but I also faced a lot of adversity. I mean, got told no by literally everyone, but fortunately they didn't tell me to make a papier-mâché volcano for my science fair project. However, one of the greatest adversities I faced wasn't really in doing the actual experiments, it was getting access to the information I needed. You see, 90% of all scientific articles are tightly behind these things called paywalls. And that means when you want access to the article, you have to cough up $35. And that exponentially raises the cost of doing research, particularly for young researchers such as myself. And we see all these big STEM initiatives that say we need more kids interested in science, but when a seminal science article costs $35 and a Katy Perry single costs 99 cents, it's a bit of a mixed message. And this isn't just a problem for 15-year-old cancer researchers, this is a problem for everyone. You see, recently, Harvard University released a statement to its faculty and students saying, we simply can't afford to continue paying for these sometimes $40,000 per year subscriptions. Now, what does it say about the world of academic publishing, the flow of information, and the accessibility of knowledge, when Harvard University, the richest academic institution in the world, can't afford to continue paying for its subscriptions? By instituting these paywalls, we've instituted this very rigid class hierarchy in terms of knowledge, where your access to knowledge is discriminated based on how much money you or your institution has. So at the top, we have the knowledge elite, these big institutions and universities that can afford these articles. But even here, we have a bit of segregation, where at the top, we have these knowledge billionaires, those big-name institutions like Harvard, Yale, MIT that can afford each and every article. And lower down, we have these state-funded institutions that can't afford as many because they don't have these multi-billion-dollar endowments. So it's like saying to the top 10 schools, you all can teach calculus and above, while everyone else is relegated to only algebra. And this tier-based dissemination of knowledge isn't working, and it simply isn't effective. But then lower down, we have the knowledge middle class, people like you or me. We can access the few open access articles out there and maybe read a few abstracts here and there. But then there's the knowledge underclass, those 5.5 billion people who lack access to information and are living in knowledge poverty. So essentially, we're living in a knowledge aristocracy. We're only 0.008% of the world's population. Those are the only people who can access scientific information. And so it's like taking 80 people off the streets of New York City and saying, you guys are the only ones who can access scientific information. Everyone else in the city, too bad for you. And then we have 85% of the world's population, 5.5 billion people, who are living in knowledge poverty and can't contribute to innovation. But now imagine if instead we could live in a knowledge democracy, where what you look like, age, or gender doesn't apply. Whether you're a billionaire or living on less than $1 a day, you'd have the exact same access to information. Because science shouldn't be a luxury, and knowledge shouldn't be a commodity. It should be a basic human right. Because the minds of the people must be free, and that means the minds of everyone, not the minds of a select few who can afford these articles. And we can make this difference, because think, if a 13-year-old who didn't quite know what pancreas was could find a new way to detect pancreatic cancer, just imagine what we all can do together. Thank you.